infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Well, yeah, Joe, I appreciate you getting in touch with me. And you say that you have a Sasquatch encounter from Central Florida. So when did this happen?
It was late September of 2014. It was mid to late September. The exact day, I wish I could tell you. I never wrote it down, or if I did or had some type of information about it, I can't find it. But it was definitely mid to late September of 2014.
And it's totally up to you, but did you want to be more specific where in Central Florida?
Sure. It was at a Mckethan Lake State Park. It's part of the Withlacoochee State Forest landmass. That's in Central Florida. There's a Withlacoochee State Forest. I don't know how many tracts of land it makes up. I wouldn't want to quote it on it, but there's multiple tracts that make that up. And there's adjacent Division of Forestry properties. So it's a rather remote, for about as remote as Florida can be, region of Central Florida. And but at least there's a lot of connecting management lands, whether it be timber management or state forest, that kind of connect to create a forest in that region.
Yeah, that probably adds a lot of wilds onto that area. So with this location, then, obviously, you mentioned it was a large area. What kind of things go on in there as far as the state park side? The usual, like hiking, you got probably do you have any bodies of water in there that people get in? I mean, besides the gator situation there, but what kinds of things go on in that state park for the public, I mean?
Well, it's definitely a high access state park. It's really not that large. I think it's only about 60 acres that encompasses the park itself. Like I said, there's lots of surrounding forest around it. But in that actual state park, there is a lake, and you're allowed to fish there, probably allowed to swim. It's a rather shallow body of water. There is gators in there, but there's like you said, hiking trails, camping, a playground, things like that. It's just a small and actually a pretty nice, well-kept state park. And it's actually in an area of the headquarters of the Withlacoochee State Forest, where in that same area, there's training center for the state wildland firefighters. The Division of Forestry, who does the wildland firefighting, is headquarters there. Biologists and things like that will be headquarters out of that area. So it's kind of a central hub for the state forest.
Awesome. Thank you so much for setting everybody up on that, because I myself am not familiar with that particular state park, so I'll have to look that up once we hop off the phone here. But okay, well, we'll set us up. What were you doing out there? Who were you with? All that good stuff.
Well, I was by myself, and I was going for a run. I utilize that park a lot for physical fitness. It has a really nice run loop. It's a 2-mile loop. It's got some really nice grade changes, good terrain, and an area that's like really rich with wildlife. There's always those areas that seem to support more wildlife per acre than other areas that are common around there. It's a very nice place, really rich with contact. You can always be out there and see, run into deer and turkeys and things like that on a regular basis. So I was actually out there running. I was by myself. It was, I'm going to guess it was not late evening. Sun was good and bright. So it was probably about somewhere between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. And I was on a run. So in the beginning of the run, so like I said, it's a loop. It's a 2-mile loop, and probably about, I'm going to guess about a third of a mile into the loop, there's an area that's really common to see things crossing. It's a real heavily used trail. And as I ran up to that point, I smelled something unique. So I can describe it as unique. I've been in the woods a lot. I've been my whole life. I'm a hunter, avid outdoorsman, and I smelled, and it's an animal-based smell, a musk type smell. I tried to figure out real quick, is that a pig? Is that a wild pig or something? And I said, no, that's not it. I've never smelled that before. I just couldn't identify it. And one thing that made me think, like, maybe we have a plant there, a stinkhorn plant. It was the only thing that popped in my head is it had some similarity to, was this odd smell, just an odd smell. And I was like, man, what is that animal? But there was nothing in the area, and I really didn't think anything more of it. I was involved in my run. So I continue on, and I get to the end of my run, towards the end of the 2 miles, which, as the crow flies, is probably about 600, maybe 600 yards from where I had encountered that smell. And I'm running up a grade. It's the last little run where you're just kind of digging in, and the run's almost over. It's a real steep hill, and I'm kind of lean forward, focused on running up the hill. And it was a very quick. I mean, so fast. I just happened to be like naturally scanning my head left and right as I was running, and I seen it, and I turned my head straight, and basically was like, no way, I just saw that. Looked back, and it was gone. It was that fast. But what I saw, and I wanted to say, I don't know 100% what I saw that day. Okay, all I can describe is what the image in my mind is. If I had to paint a picture for you of what's implanted in my memory of what I saw, was basically the waist-high silhouette, and I describe it like a E-type silhouette, like what we would use in the Army, which was a target. You know, if you think about the target at the range, that has no arms per se, you just see the shoulder, the shape into the head, that without taper. That from the waist up, of something standing about 7 to 8 foot tall, brown like a deer, hair about the length of a bear, like not crazy long like orangutan hair, not short like a deer, but just that kind of intermediate, just so you could tell that there was a bit of hair there, you know. And I said, I saw it, it was gone. And I said, oh my God, there's no way I just saw that. And it's amazing how fast your mind thinks in those moments, because I immediately started trying to rationalize it. I'm like, and in probably in half a second, my mind went through, did I just see a Sasquatch? No way that I just saw that. I obviously saw something that made me think it was a Sasquatch, that I saw a deer that was bounding at just the right moment. The motion caught my eye, and it's obviously a deer. And because of the grade, what I saw was at the top of this hill, and the grade would go down on the other side. I knew how the terrain would flow. I said, whatever it was I just saw is on the other side of that hill. And I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to identify it. And I'm going to run up there, and I'm going to see the deer will still be in the area, which by the terrain they would. I still would have seen them. So I took off immediately, dead sprint, off the trail, through the woods, probably about, 40, 50 yards. Got to the peak of the grade. I looked out, and there was nothing there. I mean, there was nothing. There was no deer bounding. I didn't hear any deer bounding. I didn't see any. Had it been deer, I would have, you know. So it's kind of an interesting experience. And if you've had them, I don't know if you have had those experiences or anybody else describe it, but it's a very surreal moment where you're questioning yourself, what you just saw, you know. Did that really just happen? Because I'm considering myself a pretty objective person. I was trying to rationalize how that would happen, and I can't describe it to anybody else except to say, once again, I don't know what I saw that day, and I'll lend to the possibility that it was a hallucination. Was it something moving in an odd light? Was I in my subconscious? Was I thinking about a Sasquatch? You know, and it popped. I don't know what to tell you, except that if I had to paint a picture of what's in my mind of what I saw in that moment, it was what you describe as a Sasquatch or a skunk ape or Bigfoot or whatever word you put on it. I say, picture that. And that's what I saw in that moment. And I went back to that area to where I initially, then the next day, I went back to that place where the smell was. And I said, well, maybe it was in one of them flowers or one of the, those plants that make that smell. I looked high and low. I couldn't find the first evidence of it, But that was the end of it for me, as far as that contact. It was quick, but it changed my life. I mean, it really changed the way that I view the possibility of things being out there that we were maybe not totally aware of, and also gained a lot of insight into those individuals who I've heard before tell stories and I thought were maybe crazy or lying, where I'm like, well, even though I may not know what you saw, I don't know what it is that caused your experience, but I can believe now that experience is real for you because I've had the same thing. But that's about the sum of it.
Joe, okay, how big was it? I mean, the portion that you saw, the mass of the torso, basically, how big, if you could compare that to someone or something, how big was that torso that you saw?
Well, like I said, I would say it's 7 to 8 foot tall. If you're saying for like width,
yes,
it wasn't crazy. It wasn't V-shaped. It wasn't like a huge brawny thing. It was rather uniform and taper from the waist up. And I would say that it was probably just out of a large man's width of their waistline and torso, but tall. So it would be, you would, if you saw a person, you would be like, that's a rather tall person, of slender build. So they weren't it wasn't a brawny thing. It was rather, like I said, of uniform taper from the shoulders to the waist, that of a decent sized man, but 7 to 8 foot tall.
Yeah, 8 foot tall is no joke, and that would be very jarring to see.
Yeah, it was like noticeably large. And it's hard to judge that, from that distance in that run. And I'm basing that off of like my best. Like when I went to where the location was, where the tree that it was standing beside, like unique about it was, sometimes you can visualize you can look in the woods and you can see through brush and maybe something could be distorted through the brush and fool you. But this was interesting because it was, even though the brush line kind of concealed from the waist down, what was visible from the waist up, that torso, was off the tree line and away from any other vegetation. It was, probably a foot or two off of a tree to where there was sky or background, clean background, visible all around it. So that it was actually in great contrast if I'm painting a picture right. It's not like I saw that torso through a bunch of tree branches. I saw that torso very contrasted and outlined. So.
And what about its head or its face?
I didn't see that. The head was, like I said, I did see the head, the shape of the head that I said was of just that rounded taper. Like I didn't see a head shape that tapered into a neck, and back down to shoulders like a person would be. I saw just what would be the form of the head, like you were looking at one of those targets you were shooting at a range, that just flowed straight down. The face I could not see. It was quite backlit. So it was and like I said, I don't even know how much I really don't think I even focused on the, whatever it was. I didn't really achieve focus because it was a scanning, if you've done double takes on things where you turned your head and you look back and you've had to look back real quick because you're like, man, I just saw something and it almost took a second for my brain to realize what that was. So I did not focus on a face. I didn't see any features in the face at all.
And you got the smell that hit you only that one instance, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I did not smell anything when I sighted it. And whether they were associated, I don't know. It's only afterwards. Like I never, and that was funny because I had a friend I was discussing this with, trying to clear up some facts, because he actually called me a week after this, upset because he said that I set him up and given him anxiety because he ended up running out of the woods, terrified from what he thought was something in the woods. So again, yeah, it was a pretty neat story. And he said, "Hey, this is all your fault because you told me that story, and now I got irrationally scared and ran out of the woods thinking there was a beast in the woods after this encounter," you know. And I was clarifying with him in the story. I'm like, listen, man, like I'm going to say that could I have been running, and because we're both pretty scientific guys, I'm like, could I have been running, smelled this odd smell, and then in my subconscious started thinking about a Sasquatch, and then it appeared in my mind later on? Of course, I'll submit that to you. Only thing I can say is that in that moment, I know for a fact, when I smelled that smell, I never consciously considered that it was a Sasquatch or Bigfoot. I knew I had smelled something I'd never identified, but I never once said, hey, that's like a Bigfoot, or hey, that's like a Sasquatch, or could that be? I never thought about it. So whether or not I smelled something weird and then it just coincidence I saw this thing, I don't know. You know, I don't know what happened there. But yeah, I did smell it, and I would estimate about 600 yards from where the sighting happened. But at that site, I did not smell anything.
So what about your thoughts on Bigfoot prior to this encounter?
I always thought it was an entertaining gesture, that it was, the possibilities there. I always was just like trying to be objective. I'd say, we've never gotten a specimen. We've never found remains, or at least that I think that have been proven to me to be legitimate. I was like, well, so would we say mathematically that it probably doesn't exist? I'd say, yeah. I would have said yes. Still would be open for debate on it. Those are some interesting points to overcome. I would say that to believe that in all this space that we have available, that a creature could not hide and go undetected is ridiculous. Like if you think about it, in Florida, I would tell people, they say, oh, there's no other way that skunk ape's real. And I said, why do you not believe that a 400-pound, 300 to 400-pound omnivore can survive in Florida? We have bears, they survive there. Do you not believe that a primate could survive in Florida? Because we have primates that have been released, exotic ones that live all throughout Florida, from escape from zoos and things like that. So we know that could the environment support the creature? Of course it could. And then we're like, well, what about not citing it? And I've used the example of was the tree Hyperion, right? It's that redwood in California, discovered in 2006, and here's the tallest tree in the world, and it's static. It's been there, and we've been flying planes for 100 years, and only in 2006 do we truly identify the tallest tree on the continent. And how is that so? How can that hide from our detection? But obviously it did, right? It can't. So I definitely have always believed in the possibility of it, but was rather skeptical of it. Now, after this experience, changed a lot of my life, where I said, at least I'm going to consider more what other people's sightings were, believe that their encounters were real, that at least the encounter itself was real, that things will happen. You will see things, and you won't believe it until it happens to you. And I would tell people that. Like, I wish that experience upon people. I really do. Like, I wish that you would have one of these sightings and experience what it does to your mind, to open it up and be like, hey, there's things out here that I don't understand. And there's a possibility that something could be out there that's undetected.
Did this experience scare you at all, or more kind of humble and interest you?
I was humble and interest. I wasn't frightened by it. I'm definitely not a timid person by nature, but in that moment, I was just more stimulated to identify it. I like to prove to myself what just happened. There's a lot of personal accountability that goes into those moments where you ask yourself, are you crazy? Are you hallucinating? And then once I had that happen to me, it stimulated all kinds of things. It opened up my mind for, like, I even ended up, in my vacations from there, became orientated more towards things like that, where I would, like, I even went out to Area 51 and made a run on Area 51 out of just interest, where I began to say, you know what, I don't know what's possible out there, or I don't know what is necessarily a fact, but the possibilities have opened up in my mind about these things that people have told and stuff, because now I'm one of them. Now I get to experience what it's like to be one of those people that has said, hey, I've seen something, experienced something that doesn't fit the normal. And so it did open up my interest in a lot of different things. It opened up the possibilities beyond Sasquatch,
Were you going running and you were armed at that time?
No, I wasn't. I'm a gun-toting guy, but I didn't. In that environment, there's not, there's obviously the most dangerous thing in the world in the woods you're going to run into as a person. But for wildlife, there's nothing really in the state of Florida that you're going to contact on a run that, besides a human, of any that's really would need a firearm to protect myself from. Like the odds of me running into a bear or a panther, or a pig that was going to attack me are so rare that I didn't use it. I didn't carry it for the extra burden of weight when I'm trying to run. So I definitely wasn't armed at that time. I've carried knives sometimes in that situation. But I don't think I was armed at all at that time.
And I know you said you went back the very next day to kind of check things out, which is a huge high five. And knowing what I do about you, that's not surprising. But did it change the way that you ran there, or the time of day, or did it make you more apprehensive to do so?
No, if anything, I say it did change. Except I just would go there more often, to tell you the truth. I wanted to have the encounter again. I mean, if I could have the encounter again, I would. It was exciting. It was fun. It was eye-opening. I've never had a fear about it. I definitely think that, if I was in contact with close proximity, I would assume that whatever it is, if it's a terrestrial creature that's just been undiscovered, if it's a primate that's undiscovered, if I got within proximity of it, it would be very concerned about that and may physically injure me, right? And I would expect that of any creature, especially one that elusive, that if I cornered it, it would harm me. If it was an extraterrestrial being, which I definitely went to the concept that Bigfoot could be that I wouldn't want to get too close to it either. I wouldn't want to, something negative could happen to me in that situation. But I wasn't going to try to avoid it, to contact with it. I mean, just that's no different than me saying I'm not going to go in the woods because there's a bear there that could harm me. I actually want to see that bear. I want to come in proximity with it, to enjoy that experience. To close with it is the risk. The reward is worth the risk. So I definitely continue to go out there. If you had if you told me things I could do to increase my chance of contact with it, I would have done it.
Okay, that's very interesting, and I could totally be on that side of things with you. I could see that for myself, me saying that. So with that being said, what would you change about the encounter? Would you have seen it longer? Would you have been closer to it? I mean, not like you said, it's a wild animal. You don't want to corner it or anything, but what would you change about the encounter?
I would have loved to have been able to stop and focus on it and catch it for a minute to truly identify what it was. Like if I could tell you what its facial features looked like, or if it was even real in the first place, right? I mean, I'll tell you that, like I said, I've worked in public service a long time, and you hear people's accounts of things, and as an individual, I know that my accounts, I've had videos of things that I saw with my own eyes, watched a video afterwards, and said, man, I don't remember it going down that way, but it did, right? But in my mind, received that information in a obviously in its own way. So I submit that it could have been a number of things. My mind paints the picture that it was a Sasquatch standing there. What it really was, who really knows, right? I would have loved to have stopped I would love to have truly identified and been here to tell you. I'd love to be able to say to you, anybody, 100% guaranteed, I identified that was a Sasquatch. Or I'd love to be able to say, hey, man, I thought I saw a Sasquatch. Turned out it was a deer running, or turns out, I had an old memory of something that my brain just kind of flashed at the right moment of hypoxia while I was running. I'd love to have the absolute truth, and if I could have stopped and seen him for a second to really take it in more, I think I would have been able to come to a better conclusion, But I give you an example, like my friend's story, like when I talk about these moments where, like a week later, this is a week after, and at another landmass that's kind of similar to this one, where my buddies that ran from the woods, he was out scouting for deer, ends up hearing something, goes near a bayhead of water, hears something crash into the water with great explosion. And to him, he thought, well, that sounds like maybe a deer has hit the water, and or a gator has hit the water, but a gator, the water didn't meet, the water mass didn't meet that of where you would find a gator, and the deer would normally continue to bound. And he said they realized, like, there's something has just leaped into the water, is standing there looking at me. And as I tried to review it with him, he says I ran out of the woods scared, because I just knew that in my heart that there was a large creature standing there staring at me, probably about to come out. And speaking with him afterwards the other day to review it, he says, well, I'm looking back and I think an actual tree must have fell and hit the water. And I said, that's a pretty good explanation. It's weird we didn't think of that in the moment. And then I started thinking about it deeper, and I said, wait a minute. I said, did you hear distinctive cracking sounds of trees falling or bouncing off of other trees in the area? Like when I've heard things fall in the woods, a tree, I hear those distinctive sounds associated with a tree that is falling. I said, if you had heard those sounds surrounding that, your brain wouldn't have gone to the fact that there was a creature there. I said, you most likely did not hear them. So right now you're trying to rationalize how could it be anything but that? When the truth is, you had an experience, and we don't know what it is. It would be nice to know. Of course, it would be really good to know 100%. I can't tell you that I know what mine was 100%. I can't. I can tell you that 100% my experience was real. The things that I'm saying to you are true. That I saw what I saw in my mind. That is real. There's nothing made up about that. The truth of what it truly was that created that experience, I really wish I did that.
It's always nice to hear somebody that has an experience and it doesn't keep them from exploring more. It doesn't keep them out of the woods. You said you actually went back with more frequency after this. That's always good to hear, because as you know, there's been plenty of stories on mine and other podcasts where the experiences are truly horrifying, and they thought that they were going to be killed by the creature that they saw.
Yeah, that would definitely be a more intense situation, and that might have changed things. If I had been in more proximity or more of a, to feel the threat. I mean, that being said, I probably would have if I had that type of experience, I'll be honest with you, if me personally had that type of a close encounter, unidentified, or undeniably a Sasquatch that I thought was a physical threat, my life would have probably evolved to complete total pursuit of that with the weapon for the purpose of obtaining a specimen to prove it. That's how it would have affected me. It would have been like, hey, if I know that 100% guaranteed that was real and that was out there, I'm going to find it. I'm going to try and capture it or kill it. To bring it to light. That would have been definitely. I wish I'd had it to that level. It would have been exciting. Mine was still stimulating enough to say, to continue to I don't go out and obsessively focus just on the squatch. Like if I still continue to go outdoors all the time. And to me, as I'm looking for anything in the woods, I'm looking for all wildlife there. So I'm going to be alert to any movement, to any living thing in my environment, to identify it for the purposes of hunting or just to experience it, to see it. So naturally, by doing that, by default, I'm also searching for a Sasquatch at all times. I would not miss a Sasquatch because I was looking for a deer. The same skills and focus that what takes the pursuit to try to identify a deer was going to expose me to a Sasquatch, if you can grasp that.
Now, Joe, your friend, and I'm trying to just kind of understand maybe where he's coming from and exactly what he experienced. I mean, heck, it'd be even better if he ever wanted to talk to me about it. That'd be amazing. But he said that he did actually see a creature or something, he says, in the water that was looking at him, or he's just like having a feeling that that's what it was.
Yeah, he's just having the feeling, like based on. So, if you want me to elaborate a little bit more on his, I don't want to speak for him, but I give you a basic idea. He's around it's dark, it's low light, so he cannot see very well at all. He's on his way out of the woods for the night after scouting. He's near a shallow body of water that's like a normal drainage point for water, a low spot, a swampy area. Okay, that wouldn't be a type of body of water that would doesn't retain water for enough period of time to sustain fish or anything like that. It's just a heavy rain collects here type situation. He's going by, hears a very large crashing sound of something hitting the water. Something that he puts in his mind is the sound of a deer he is spooked that is now bounding through the water. And if you ever heard that, it's a series of deer bounding, explosion in series of the animal bounding away and through a swamp area. And he says he's anticipating that next sound, and it's not there. And him being a guy who's actually a gator hunter is like, you think could it be a gator hitting the water? And he's like, that's not the body of water. There wasn't enough water there to support it, especially a gator of that size, to make that sound. So he's like, oh my God, his mind at least went to something has jumped out of a tree or out of something and has stood in the water and is now standing there static. And we're having kind of a standoff type moment.
Gotcha.
And he decides, he becomes overwhelmed with this sensation that he actually, and this guy's, like me, he's a combat veteran, he's not a cowardly type individual, but decides the situation is so out of his control that he actually runs away out of the area, so, and that's why he contacted me. It's like, well, you did this to me, you
Right.
made me scared, you made me, why would you messed me up with your story, and I basically told him, I was like, hey man, I'm glad for you. You had an experience, man. I'm welcome to the team, buddy. I'm like, I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
It's try to embrace it. And but that was his story. I'll tell him if he wants. Obviously I'm getting some things wrong, I'm sure, but I'll tell him to reach out to you if he wants to communicate with you.
And see how differently you each processed these two things,
Sure.
right? And you even saw one, and I can only imagine if he actually saw one, how he would react. Even just the thought of your experience sent him running, that had to be a terrifying thing for him, because if you're at the point where you're actually running scared from anything, it's got to be a horrible feeling.
Yeah, it takes a lot to push somebody to that level, right? I mean, we all have anxiety throughout the day, and something makes us nervous, but to take it to the point where you're like, man, I feel like everything is so out of control for me, I'm going to bolt.
Right.
We do that very few times in our life, to tell you the truth, and could it be irrational? Could it be, a series of, I don't know what happened to him. Like I said, I wasn't there. He's a very skeptical person about it. We're buddies. We have some very different viewpoints on things but still manage to be friends. And so we he'll take it in comic relief with me about my sighting, and he's like, hey, you're crazy or whatever, and I'm like, hey man, I I'll tell you, I'd be like, hey, I understand exactly where you're coming from, because I was like you, you know. But I'll tell you, and one of the things that I've found, and you've probably seen this, if, like I said, I don't know what your experiences have been, what you have seen and encountered that drove you to do the research you do. But one of the greatest things I find in my storytelling is, first off, I love everybody's expression when I bring it up, because they're generally people that I kind of have been communicating with for a while. They think of me as a rather intelligent person, as a professional person. And then I tell them this, and I watch their face change to where they're basically all having this thing like, oh my God, you're one of these guys. I wasn't anticipating this. My whole view of you has changed. And I think it's entertaining to watch that. I love that part of it, because I know it's going to happen. It's predictable, because everybody instantly takes on a different, like, oh my goodness, you know? And so, but what's really neat is, I'm going to tell you, it's got to be 80% of the time that I'm telling this story. And I start laying on the facts where, like I tell you, where I'm like, you know, I don't know for sure what it was. It could have been a lot of things. I'm just telling you what happened to me was real. Okay. What happens then is an opening up. And I'm telling you, it's got to be 80% will begin to tell a story that has happened to them, or has happened to somebody who they hold in high regard, that they don't believe is a liar, about an encounter, whether it be with a Sasquatch, whether it be of a paranormal, whether it be of a UFO or alien type encounter. Almost everybody has a piece of some story that they can't quite explain, and they're really, I guess, intimidated or scared to bring it to light. And it's only in those moments where it's like, okay, the guard's kind of down, you know, this guy's exposed himself, so I'm going to expose myself a little bit. It's amazing the number of people that I've had open up when I tell that story, where there's more encounters like this happening than you know about.
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, Joe, I love that you said that, because I've said it on the show as well, that the second I've said it at work, when I kind of came out of the weirdo closet, you know, and everyone's kind of I know that look all too well. And it took a while, but honestly, you're not far off with the percentage either of people that eventually, it may not have been that very same moment that they found out, but eventually they came up and they told me about their own experience or experiences. And you are spot on with that.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, it's something I wish on everybody, because it's enjoyable. It really is. It opens your mind up to what the possibilities are. You know, I mean, in looking at it rationally, I say, you know, tell people, look at this stuff, look at it scientifically. You know, let's keep the argument legitimate. You know, just look at what's possible. You know, tell me. You say, yeah, have I proven its existence? No. Have you proven its non-existence? No. You know, so let's move forward with it. You know, and continue to look and be very objective about it. You know, it's funny, because after watching your show, it's amazing. And even though I don't think your show hit that on it too much, but the possibility of a Sasquatch being a visitor, and I never really put the two together. I thought they were two separate things, right? And then I said, well, wait a minute. Why do we not have these remains? Squatch would have inevitably tripped over a cliff and fell, and we would have walked upon his remains, right? We would have, he would have ran out and got hit by a car. Something like this would have occurred, you know. How come I don't have the physical evidence? I don't have some remains, you know. And then I asked, like, well, and how would it evolve over so many different biomes, right? Well, how come I have a creature that's living in the swamps of Florida, and then is also in the Himalayas, right? These are two radically different ecosystems here. Why is this creature able to exist in both of them? Nothing really spans that quite a distance of evolution or of terrain. Like, well, if something was visiting here in its own controlled environment, it has its own craft or vessel or whatever. Yeah. Now that becomes, is that possible? Yeah, it's possible that you would not have remains all over the place for you to find. You don't have thousands of years of living and dying creatures on your planet to find. You don't have it. And also in a controlled environment, can you move to different Sure, if I've got a nice airplane or my own controlled vehicle, I can move through, from Death Valley all the way to the Himalayas, right? I mean, I could exist in these environments if I have a support area of climate or whatever, my own place to live or sleep or to refit. So, and it's funny to me, it never hit my mind until that, just a few weeks ago, did I ever say, wait a minute, man, how come I never saw that potential, but
Mm-hmm.
who knows what is, there's a lot of possibilities out there. And I would just challenge people to, open up your mind, when I say open up your mind, open up your scientific mind, look at it objectively, put it through the tests, but don't shut down. Don't say, there's just no way, or some smart person someday told me that there's no way that's possible. So now I by default only believe that. Don't do that. There's more to the story out there. There's a lot of things we don't know and understand. So get out there and try to get after it and keep an open mind.
See, those are the people that I hope for the most that will have one of these brown pants moments, the underwear changing moment, as Will Jevning like to say. And those are the people I hope the most that would have at least some kind of an experience. It doesn't even have to be a face-to-face, to where they really at least start to question that maybe it's possible that they're out there.
Yeah, I think you're a fool if you say the truth. Like, I'm just going to say it. You are a fool if you don't think that it's possible. I mean, look, most people would tell you, if I said, do you believe that life could possibly exist on Earth or outside of Earth? And most of your intelligent people will say, yeah, it's definitely, and a lot of people say, do you think it does? And most people will say, I think it probably does. Like, well, so if you believe that life exists outside of Earth, and do you believe that we, therefore, it could be the same level of us or higher? And a lot of people assume that it's higher, the higher level of life. And I'll be like, do you believe that we travel outside of the Earth, and to different bodies? And I'll be like, yeah, of course I believe that. And I'm like, well, but you're going to tell me that although you believe that life exists outside of the Earth, and that they would be at our level or greater, and that we travel outside of our system, outside of our planet, but you're going to tell me there's no way that somebody would travel to here. That's totally impossible. Well, that's ridiculous. You got to figure out what you truly believe in at that point in time. You really got to think that. And if you say, well, you don't believe that, if I say, like I said, I currently live in Alaska now, and like, if I said, come out here and engage in the wilderness, look at the vastness, and tell me that do you really believe that some creature could live out there that you might never see? Do you really think that's not possible? Of course you're going to say, yeah, it's possible. This is a vastness that's ridiculous. Anything could hide out there and be unfound. I mean, do grizzly bears, huge bears, die of old age out there because people never see them? Absolutely, right? So, yeah, these things are possible. Don't be a fool. Don't turn your mind off to where you're like, I believe you could say probably. You can be like, hey, I'm going to do the probability that that does not exist. But don't tell me that it's not possible, because you're probably lying to yourself, and you're not really considering all of your own beliefs. Because if you truly believe these things are not possible, then you're shutting down a lot of key concepts that have to be in place for you to believe that that's not possible.
Joe, before I let you go, one more question, because I know that this really lit a fire for you with the Bigfoot stuff. Did you come across any reports? It's always contingent on someone actually filing the report, of course, but did you come across any reports from that particular area?
No, I didn't. I looked for it. I looked, like I said, I tried to contact BFRO, got no, 2 times I tried to contact them. It's a couple years apart, and had no success. Had looked under some maps. I think there was, I forget the name of the council. It was the Gulf Coast. I want to say it's Gulf Coast Skunk Ape Council or something like that. There's multiple little organizations that kind of start up and then shut down, I think. I seen some maps. I saw nothing in my spot, but and even went to the locals, the the people at headquarters for the Withlacoochee State Forest and asked them if they had any reports. And of course, I get the look we're talking about.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, hey, look, I'm just trying to ask us if you have any information from it. They said no, but like having contacted a few people that have had sightings, right? Of course, most of them just don't get reported. They don't get documented. It almost seems like people would do like what I've thought about doing, which was starting my own kind of research organization, that you end up not getting traction about people believing your story or having that data, that you instinctively start trying to gather your own and create your own maps and things like that, because there's not a real good network of it. Long story short, I do not know specifically. There was reports. I remember finding some information that there was a rock crusher canyon in Lecanto that, like, in the 70s or 80s, there was reports of there being some type of creature that people were seeing there for a period of time. Other than that, I came up with zero for that particular area. Although I'll guarantee you there's multiple account stories out there that just never made it to a real database.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's always unfortunately contingent on, well, like you said, someone getting back in touch with you if you're willing to make the report, and someone, of course, being willing to make the report in the first place. Well, Joe, thank you so very much for being willing to come on and share your encounter with us. Yeah,
it was great. I'm glad to tell the story. It was good to get it out. Like I said, I was motivated by the last show I saw on Amazon about it, just kind of rekindled it. Saw some of the stories on there that kind of hit home with me a little bit, and said, hey, man, let me try to just reach out again and see if anybody wants to hear this story. It's probably rather run of the mill, but it's my story. And so I'm glad to share it. I appreciate the opportunity.
See, it doesn't sound run of the mill to me, because I know I put myself in your shoes, and I would just be so ecstatic and blown away to finally have seen one. That is very far from run of the mill. So that is hopefully encouraging to more people that, you're not high-fiving a Bigfoot or putting them in a headlock, but it doesn't mean it's not a great story. And please reach out and share, because the more we can collate this information, the better. So, no, thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little file. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes and consulting our memories. But then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam by the koans to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. don't believe literally in reincarnation, that after your funeral, you will suddenly become somebody different, living somewhere else. They will say reincarnation means this, that if you sitting here now are really convinced that you're the same person who walked in the door half an hour ago, you're being reincarnated. If you are liberated, you understand that you're not. The past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. There is only the present. That's the only real you that there is. The Zen master Dogen put it in this way. He said, spring does not become the summer. First there is summer, and then there is spring. When you settle down in the train to read your newspaper and so on, you are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. A master will say to somebody, "Now get up and walk across the room." And he comes back and he says, "Where are your footprints?" They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.